On our hotline right now is Connor O'Gara, the senior columnist on Saturday Down South. We appreciate him joining us on this Monday. Connor, how'd you enjoy the first couple of weeks of college football?
Lovely and unpredictable. I am currently wrapping up a column about the preseason predictions that I already feel terrible about. It was that kind of Saturday, it felt like, in college football. So, yeah, there's nothing like having 8 months of thoughts about something and then just immediately reverting back to something else. It was a wild and weird week, too.
I'm seeing news out of Stillwater that Colin Oliver, one of the linebackers, is out for a month with a foot injury that he suffered in the game against Arkansas. He only made a couple of tackles. Connor, that was a tough one for the Hawks because they outplayed Oklahoma State in just about every facet, but couldn't hold on to the ball, couldn't get out of their own way in some cases, and a very winnable road game against a good Oklahoma State team fell through their fingers.
The fact that they held Ollie Gordon without a run longer than 5 yards for the first 3 quarters of that game and still lost is such a tough pill to swallow, because I thought that defense, for the most part, really did what it set out to do. And Travis Williams, I continue to say he's very underrated as a defensive coordinator and somebody that I think is going to be rising in the coaching ranks very soon. But man, Arkansas did so many things well on the offensive side of the ball, and this 1-2 punch of Taylen Green and Quinton Jackson looks like it's going to be fun this year. But that's the type of loss that if you're in year one, it has a totally different vibe. And I think you could take all the positives from that if you were a year one coach and go, see, this is something to build on moving forward. And instead, with Sam Pittman, someone who knows that he's on the hot seat, this is the type of loss that can be the difference in you staying and going. It really could be. And it could be the type of game that Sam Pittman wants to have back, because you continue to lose these one-score games, and at a certain point, that comes back to the head coach. And many would argue that point came long ago, but a very, very winnable game, a game that Mike Gundy tried to give away by settling for a field goal, kneeling to get to a field goal in overtime that was missed. I feel terrible for Arkansas fans who endure just a roller coaster Saturday.
Connor, in week one, I thought USC's victory over LSU was the best win of the week. This last week, Texas going into the Big House and just the way they won that game. Any hesitation to put them at number one overall right now after that win?
I'd be okay with it. I put Georgia at number one overall. We do weekly top 25 on SaturdayDownSouth.com, but I have no problem with putting Texas at number one. And if you were of the belief that Texas wasn't worthy of being in the national championship conversation, I hope you watched the way that Texas won that game, because it felt like all of the areas that we had questions about with this Texas team, it felt like they really thrived in those spots. The defensive line, they lost Bo Davis to LSU. They lost their top 2 guys, Sweat and Murphy, to the NFL, and they were exceptional, I thought, against the Michigan offensive line that was supposed to be their anchor. And along with Michigan's defensive line with Mason Graham and All-American, they really did not have a whole lot of success at all. And Quinn Ewers, the plays that guy continues to make, doesn't matter that he's got a new look group of receivers, he just continues to rise in these big-time moments. It felt like he just picked up right where he left off last year in the Week 2 win that they had at Alabama. It was more of the same. And Texas is for real. And even if you don't think Michigan is worthy of even being in a playoff conversation, if you think they're going to revert back to being a 7-5, 8-4 team, think about this. Isn't that what a national championship contender is supposed to do in front of 100,000 fans? 100,000 fans who haven't seen their home team lose in front of them since 2019? Like, that's what you're supposed to look like. And to me, all the credit in the world goes to Steve Sarkisian.
Got to have a thought on Auburn. I know that was Auburn's been a kind of a pick for maybe one of the more improved teams from one year to the next under Hugh Freeze. I don't know how many people, though, had barely being able to move the ball against Cal at home. And I've thought this from the start, but the more I look at what happened in that ball game, 2 weeks from now on the Plains, that is as winnable of a road game for Arkansas as they'll have all year long.
Arkansas's defensive line has the advantage up front against Auburn's offensive line. I mean, there's no question about it. And for those wondering, like, could Hugh Freeze make a change? He just had media availability and said, like, yeah, Peyton Thorne's out playing all of them in practice. So if if you're an Auburn fan who's hoping for a change, that doesn't really feel like it's imminent. I don't really think that New Mexico, not New Mexico State, but New Mexico, I don't think they're going to be the ones to necessarily expose Peyton Thorne, but it was disastrous. Like, it was a game that I watched, and I just felt like I was watching the game that they played against New Mexico State last year. It was that all over again. Peyton Thorne, the struggles that he has in year 2 in this scheme with better pass catchers is so frustrating. I predicted that Peyton Thorne was going to be the most improved player in the SEC. I like the surroundings a lot more. I like the fact that he was going to be in year 2 in the scheme, full off season, and he looked like an even worse version of himself. To me, that is just a team right now that feels like it could be all over the place. And they didn't go after a quarterback in the portal. I can bet you that Auburn fans are absolutely wishing that they had a guy like a Taylen Green who could actually do some things that makes your team better instead of looking like the guy that is holding everything back.
Connor, I was impressed with Tennessee as well. What are your thoughts? I know Tennessee, you got to play the people on your schedule. They got another warm-up before Oklahoma. Is Tennessee the real deal? Does Tennessee have a legitimate shot to make this playoff 12?
Yeah, no doubt about it. They do. Look, I was skeptical of Tennessee because all the new pieces they had in their secondary, their 5 guys in their defensive backfield that played at least 300 snaps last year, all were gone. And NFL, transfer portal, like they just had an entirely new look secondary. And I thought, you know what, that's going to give them problems. What's going to happen if they can't generate pressure up front? I know everybody loves James Pierce Jr. and Amari Thomas on the defensive line, but what's it going to look like behind those guys? You just might not have to worry about it if they're going to continue to win battles like that up front because, my goodness, I mean, the scary thing about that game, a top 25 matchup that very much that did not feel like it by day's end. They won that game 51-10 against a respected NC State program, and it felt like they actually left some points out there. I mean, Nico Yamaleyava had 2 interceptions in this game and was solid. He was fine, but he didn't make all those dazzling throws that we've seen him make in the young part of his career. And instead, this Tennessee defense just continues to take over. They still have not allowed a touchdown yet this season. They might not allow a touchdown against Kent State this week. They might be going into that Oklahoma game in week 4 without having allowed a touchdown on that side of the ball, which is just remarkable. Credit Tim Banks. That group has certainly outperformed what I thought they would be able to do this year. Josh Heupel's got himself a real legitimate football team. They're a 12-team playoff contender, no doubt.
All right, how bad could it get for Kentucky now? That was a yeesh against South Carolina. They get Georgia this week. I mean, Ole Miss 2 weeks after that, before the bye. I mean, they very well could be 0-3. They probably will be 0-3 in the SEC. And we've kicked it around in the show quite a bit. It's like Mark Stoops did not really seem like he was very long for being a coach any longer in college football. And I guess Kentucky kind of played like that.
One of my predictions coming into this season was that Mark Stoops would step down at Kentucky after this year, that this would be his last season in Lexington. And every vibe that I've gotten from them is that he is not really into this version of college football. I think it frustrates him. I think he does everything he feels like he can possibly do in terms of hiring offensive coordinator, getting big splashy pieces on the offensive side of the ball in the transfer portal, and he feels like it still isn't enough. And I think that frustrates him. And I looked at this matchup as a favorable one for Kentucky because, yes, it was only Southern Miss in the opener, but that Kentucky defense was still going to be able to have its way against the South Carolina offense. And they actually performed pretty well. They had a couple of coverage busts and got exposed on the back end a little bit. But, man, this Kentucky offensive line that was once a staple of a Mark Stoops program had no chance whatsoever. And South Carolina's pass rush is legit. I mean, that's why they're hosting College Game Day against LSU. That group is fun up front. But, man, it was so bad. And I couldn't have imagined that Brock Vandagriff was going to look that bad in 60 minutes of football against anyone this year, much less against South Carolina at home. It certainly does not bode well for his reunion against his former team this upcoming week, the former Georgia transfer. So I think there are a lot of people in Lexington that are feeling like this might be the beginning of the end.
Now, maybe I should hesitate putting in these terms based on what I saw from Arkansas this past Saturday. I look at games at Auburn and at Starkville as you need to win these games and probably should win those games too. Looking at the A&M game, A&M played a very an uninteresting game, or uninterested against Notre Dame. Notre Dame apparently believed the hype, according to Marcus Freeman, in their loss against Northern Illinois. Arkansas can beat A&M at the Cowboys Stadium. And I'm saying that independent of the idea that, they always play them tough, but they usually find a way to lose. This team this year can beat that A&M team, without having to be fancy or anything. It's based on what I saw this past Saturday. What do you think of A&M right now?
Yeah, the only reservation I would have with that, because you're right, I absolutely think Arkansas can beat A&M, despite the fact that Jerry World has obviously been a house of horror for the Razorbacks. But the only thing that would concern me is what those Texas A&M defensive ends can do against Taylen Green. If they can force him into some of those mistakes, which we know down the stretch, ball security was an issue, and it wasn't just Taylen Green. I thought the Satania fumble was really, really costly in that spot. But I think that's maybe the only thing that could prevent me from definitively saying, yes, Arkansas should absolutely have that advantage, because those Texas A&M defensive linemen had a lot of success against Notre Dame. Now, they couldn't get those stops down the stretch, but they did everything in their power to be able to win. A&M does have a lot of flaws, though. They have flaws on the offensive line. They don't have go-to receivers. I like Connor Wigman a lot, and I do think he'll have better days than he had against the Irish, but he really struggled with his decision-making in that one. And what does it look like for A&M when they don't necessarily get that push up front? They aren't winning those one-on-ones with those stud defensive linemen. But, yeah, man, you suddenly look at that Arkansas schedule with the strength and the identity that it feels like Arkansas has at this point of the season, and it does feel like there are a lot more winnable games than what we were probably projecting, before this season.
Great stuff, Connor. We went through just about the entire SEC there, so looking forward to doing it again in a couple of weeks, and that'll be Auburn week for us.
Awesome. Really appreciate it, guys.
You got it. Connor O'Gara, Saturday Down South. We appreciate his time. He gives it to us every other Monday. By the way, it'll be the A&M game when we do talk to him again that week.
BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your phone. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts.